Joining me now is retired four-star U.S. Army General and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark. General, thank you for joining us. Obviously,
thank you.
A lot has changed in the last 16 years. What are the challenges right now?
Well, the challenge right now is the Taliban is actually growing in strength despite our billions of dollars spent on training the Afghan army. The Afghan army is taking lots of casualties, sometimes as many as 20 per day on average. So we're chewing up the Afghan army forces faster than we can build experience and combat capability. And that's because Pakistan is still supporting the insurgency because it doesn't want a stable, Western-oriented Afghan government.
So how do you deal with Pakistan?
Well, you've got to deal with Pakistan, and this is going to be the interesting thing about what the president says. How do you deal with Pakistan? Because they are a nuclear power. They have been, in the past, a traditional U.S. ally as well as an ally of China. We used to do troop exercises with Pakistan back in the 1970s and 80s. So we used to know Pakistan really well, and we used Pakistan to fight, to build up the Mujahideen, to fight the Soviets when they were in Afghanistan. Pakistan's kept its long tentacles out into Afghanistan. Do you cut off aid? Do you threaten it? It's a nation of almost 200 million people. It's a big, powerful nation with lots of support from our allies like Saudi Arabia and our friends in the Gulf. And so we do worry about how to effectively maneuver Pakistan out of support for the rebels or the Taliban in Afghanistan. And so far, no administration's figured out how to do this.
So is the president right when he says we're losing the war in Afghanistan? And if he is right, what does winning look like?
Well, I think we're basically in there for intelligence purposes to prevent the emergence of ungoverned spaces in which a new terrorist entity like an ISIS could take form and then muster resources to threaten U.S. interests elsewhere in the world. So we're in there for our own purposes right now. But the Afghan government that we're supporting is not able to maintain control of all the provinces and districts in the country. And that's why people say we're losing. Those provinces or those districts are one by one succumbing to Taliban attack as the Afghan army and security forces crumble away. But there's loads of corruption underneath that. And there's real questions as whether you could ever have a unified government throughout all of Afghanistan, honestly, because it's tribal and it's never had a strong central government. And that's our model and what we've proposed. So if you're going to win in Afghanistan, what it really means is you're not going to kill everybody who's resisting you. They're just going to fade into the woodwork, so to speak. They're going to go back to being local people in Afghanistan. Some of them may flee to Pakistan, but most of them will just go to ground, so to speak. And what you're going to have is an absence of resistance. But that means, and that can only come about when Pakistan primarily, but also Iran and the Russians, and maybe the Chinese even, stop feeding resources and advice and training and weaponry into the struggle.
General, I want to get two more questions in, so hopefully we can do this quickly. 4,000 more troops. We've got 8,400 there now. If the president announces that he wants to send 4,000 more, does that make a difference?
Yeah, it makes a marginal difference, sure. It means that you can
you win the war with that?
Ground. No, you're not going to win the war militarily. You're going to win it diplomatically.
And then secondly, is there anything to this idea that some are throwing out there that there needs to be some negotiation with some members of the Taliban, the less radical members of the Taliban?
I think that's absolutely essential. I think you've got to fight, talk on something like this. And so the quicker we get started talking, learning their issues, knowing who they are, trying to split them up, and maybe even coming up with a solution that's a ceasefire and ends the fighting, stops the killing, sooner the better.
Something that might have seemed unthinkable 16 years ago. General Wesley Clark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.